He's an author of many different books, Variety, Guide to Paddleboarding to Grief. I found him on Podcast, and he has a bunch of different topics, and I was like, one of the topics that stuck out to me was the gay community. I have not had the privilege or honor to be able to talk to a person from that community on this podcast. And it was the reason I found it to be interesting is that we all have secondary or thirdary issues that comes with being able to talk or feeling silenced. So, how are you doing, Mr. G. Scott?
I am doing well. It's good to be here, Will. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. Thank you for responding so quickly to when I reached out to you. I found it to be a pleasure to actually read a person that is a man of multiple culture.
I am. I am. I have been described. Somebody described me as a Renaissance man when they were talking yesterday and introducing me. And I have a friend that I work with. Her name is Cindy Hollis, and she describes me as dogs be quiet. She describes me as a placenta of information, which is an interesting topic or an interesting label.
Well, placentas does have a lot of nutrients and a lot of, and it does have a lot of added value. And if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have humankind.
Yep, yes. I think she actually misspoke that, and this is how she dug herself out by, saying, "Well, now that I've said that, yes."
So before G and I got on, Mr. Scott and I got on here before, we were talking about, and this is interesting. This will actually get into later on the topic of. I said I don't know much about the gay community, and I was talking about in my class the LGBT, and I said this isn't my first language, so please give me grace. And he kindly said this is not their first language either. And then went into oppression from like the Irish over here in New York to other things, and it's going to be a great conversation.
All right. So where would you like to start?
So tell me about what got you into learning about a bunch of different topics.
Oh man, it's been a plague as well as a blessing. The plague part is when I went to undergraduate school. Hold on, the dogs are going crazy.
You're good.
This is life in rural Vermont, right? So when I went to undergraduate school, I had so many different interests. I graduated from high school early because I was just really, it's going to sound arrogant, smart. Finished it up really early. Went to college. I was in college when I was 17, and I got stuck. I switched majors like 7 times. I was there for like 8 years in undergraduate school, and I went to school in the summer. My parents were like, "We don't know what's going on with him." People would say, "What's happening with your son?" They're like, "Well, we have no idea." "What's he studying now?" They're like, "Well, we have no idea." And I had so many credits. By the time I did graduate, I had enough credits for 2 separate bachelor's degrees. It's crazy. And so I've always had this interest in all kinds of different topics, and I feel like I have a voice too. So the interest plus the voice ends up becoming this impetus to write and put things out there. So I'm actually writing a book that I started in 2014 or 15 about hiking the GR20, which is if you're in Europe, it's considered the toughest hiking trail in Europe. And so everybody, that's kind of people in France are interested in, people in the UK are interested in it. But no one in America knows about it. So I'm putting together that book. I hiked it in 2015 and wrote the trip off on my taxes because I was planning to write a book. And so 10 years later now, I better do it before I get in trouble with the IRS. Even though that's past the 7-year window, I still feel like I need to write it to make it happen. So it's sent off to the editor that I'm working with now to kind of tweak it and give me feedback.
as much as a person that likes to learn, isn't it sometimes very lonely when you're actually doing a lot of these tasks, people asking you where you're at, and then all of a sudden it's just like you have one thing taking over another area?
Yes. Yeah, that's very true. Sometimes it feels like I'm plate spinning, and I'm running around from one thing to another, focused on that, especially when it comes to keeping up on top of like continuing education credits, which, once you get your degree, it's like you think it's over, right? I've got my degree. You're going to be like, oh, now you're licensed. Now you have CEUs that you have to get every year, and every single thing I've got floating out there has CEUs, from the EMT CEUs to I'm an insurance rep. I have those CEUs. I have substance abuse CEUs. I have counseling CEUs. It goes on and on and on and on. Love CEUs.
Well, so I'll jump into it as a person that works with or knows about psychedelics. I don't know if you're an integration coach, but it's what got you involved in that area of helping people out with the modalities? Like, because I know that it's been more of I don't want to say a pop culture thing now. It's more of or a hip thing. I noticed that like ayahuasca has been getting bigger names, MDMA for self love, for couples counseling. They're bringing that back up before it was hijacked by the rave community. Same thing with ibogaine and other addictions. So, what got you more curious in that field?
So the piece that opened it up for me actually was the loss of my husband of 31 years in 2019, right as we started the COVID pandemic, epidemic, whatever you want to call it. He was killed in an automobile accident and burned alive, and that was really hard to deal with on my own. The two dogs that you heard barking before, became central to my support around this stuff. And really, I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for those, um, for the two dogs. Um, and there were there was a piece about the grief that I could not access, and it literally was a physical piece. Brian and I, at our 10th anniversary, put together this time capsule. And like all things that I guess I do, because I'm like an overachiever, I bought a little time capsule kit with like this little teeny, like, I don't know, it was like really teeny. Well, it turned into a Home Depot bucket, a 5 gallon Home Depot bucket, and it was filled. And then when we got to our 25th anniversary, I we did it again. And so that was in 2013, our 25th anniversary. And our plan was to open this up when we were, I don't know, at our 50th anniversary or something like that. And so it was filled with all kinds of stuff. Like, we took pictures of the house, we took pictures of where we were at. There were bills that we had. I mean, it's all this stuff that you would put in the time capsule that you had remembered there. But there were, you can see this is still really charged for me. There were in the time, and if you have the opportunity to do this after you hear this, you should definitely do this at some point in your life. If you've got kids, if you've got a relationship, if you're getting out of school, this is really a powerful thing to do. And I didn't think about it when we did it at the time, but at the time, we invited everybody that we knew to write letters to the future, and we put those in the time capsule. So there were letters in the future from my parents who had passed away to Brian. There were letters to me from my parents. Both of them had passed away. From my brother who had passed away. From my sister who had passed away. But of all those letters, Brian and I each wrote a letter to each other. And we each wrote a letter to ourselves, in that, to our future self, advice. And and you could, and some of the people did, you could really be superficial in the letters. Hey, hope you're having a good time, hope you're on a beach someplace, blah 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 blah. but we invited people to be a little bit deeper. And Brian and I knew that Brian was, and I knew that I was definitely deep. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell my future self what I really think. I don't have no skin in the game right now in 1998, and I knew they were just waiting for me to open, and I could not bring myself to even go there. And then a friend started talking to me about MDMA. And MDMA and how it works for those of you who are listening. Like, if someone has trauma and they're trying to work like PTSD from like a horrible thing on the battlefield, they work with a therapist, and that therapist learns the background and kind of builds this arsenal of information about what that person has experienced around trauma. But doesn't go too deep because that person can't handle it. And then that person takes MDMA, and MDMA bubble wraps them, essentially, and they're feeling really great. So they could just be there like, they'd be happy. That's it. But they're with a therapist then, who then has this arsenal of questions while they're bubble wrapped. That therapist can fire all these questions and get them to talk about that past and what they experienced, and when they talk about that, they're not only are they bridging the gap to embrace those, for lack of a better word, experiences and feelings, but they're experiencing that with a different emotional context. And so I didn't need to hire a therapist because we put together this ammunition in 2 time capsules. And that was more than enough ammunition to talk about my relationship with Brian and the trauma and the letters from myself. I mean, it was more than enough. And so I reached out to an EMT buddy of mine and said, I want to make sure I'm safe. If I, take this MDMA and go down the tubes, I want a medical professional there. And so he was great. He came out, hung out with me while I took the MDMA, cracked open the time capsules. And then what I committed on to do before this all started was that I was going to read all the letters out loud. That way there was no, I couldn't just, gloss over it, right? It really had to be in the forefront. And that was really a pivotal event in my grief journey, which is still going on. It's not like it wrapped up all my grief, but it allowed me to go someplace that I couldn't go before. And they had haunted me, and they were up there in the in the attic for years calling me, and I couldn't even talk. I couldn't even talk like this without starting to cry. Because I knew that they were loaded with like huge emotional content. And so I did a number of blog entries about that. And then I wrote about it like 6 months later, 9 months later, or a year later on where all this stood. And so that was the gateway to psychedelics for me. And then I thought, well, if this is true, then maybe this other stuff is true. And you're right, Will, when you say it's kind of like this pop thing. There's this potential psychedelic wave coming across the country. And I thought, when this comes, I want to be ready for it. So I've written 5 books now on psychedelics. The MDMA book, I wrote a book on preparing for a psychedelic journey and integrating the psychedelic journey. And I wrote a book on engagement. That's really important. Otherwise, it's just like you might as well take a psychedelics and go to a concert. You're there to work, and the time capsules create an engagement for me. And the newest book is I've created kind of inspirational readings, like 100 of them that you can read as you're getting ready for the psychedelics and read afterward to kind of guide your thinking into application. Because it's not the psychedelics that are the magic tool. It's just the tool that's out there. It's just a tool. It's what you do with the tool that's important.
One of the things I've learned from my own mental health journey is like if you take antidepressants or anti-anxiety or even psilocybin, MDMA, when you are able to actually now engage in those emotional charge contents, you're able to sit there a little bit longer. It's helping you be able to be exposed to it, realizing that the physical heart competitions of like pounding, you start to feel like you're anxious or you feel like you need to pull away, or the shame, it allows you to, and the way I explain it to people is if you look at like almost a pH scale, 0 being the lowest, 1 being the lowest, 14 being the highest. 14 is basic, 1 or 0 is acidic, and you want to be neutral about 7.1, which is be water. And what it does, it actually limits or it throttles down the emotional swings when you're able to now start to process it. And as you were sharing your story, I was thinking about, so being a gay man at that time in the 1980s, 1990s, 1970s was not a very forgiving time. It is not a time like today's day and age. Like I was having a conversation with my buddy probably about a week and a half ago, and I was like, I think fucking RuPaul is actually, that dude is a fucking stellar human. He's kind of like a hero for the gay men. He really faced a lot of prosecution from his own cultural background to really pushing for the dregs and people to be okay with it in the community. So when losing Brian, I'm pretty sure like you met him, you guys were together for a very long time. That love, those struggles, that suffering is a huge loss to you because it's very different than the instant gratification or the gratification that we're living in now, where you have had to, I don't know if you had to hide back in the past, but to be able to have a real relationship with a person of the same sex, it would be difficult in my eyes.
It was really difficult when we met, and there were times where I remember being threatened. I remember I was with a friend in this was before I met Brian, but this is really a descriptor of the times. And I was with this friend who was in a mall. Back then, we had malls that we go to. We didn't have Amazon, and we were walking through the mall, and he was, I don't know, he was a little flamboyant, and he was looking at something in a window, and some kids, I don't even remember who they were. They followed us out from the mall, and they had brass knuckles, and they were, carrying on, and they smashed the side of my car with the brass knuckles, put a dent in it. It was not, and people were in the parking lot while this was going on too, and nobody came to say anything to our aid while that was going on. There weren't any Karens back then. I mean, maybe these guys were Karens in their own way that were out to do that. But part of the reason that we did that big thing on our 10th anniversary was that here in Vermont, there was debate at that time that, should gay people be allowed to be gay, lesbian, that was, should same-sex interested people be allowed to get married? And Vermont was the first state to pass that. And so we were actually a write-up in the newspaper from that year about us and our 10th anniversary, and a picture of us that was in the newspaper. It was like a huge big deal to have that, for that to happen. And that was in the time capsule too. I mean, really, those things really brought me back to that part of our life. And it's not only is there a kind of closeted piece around who you are and your identity, but there's a lack of support around your relationships, right? I mean, I've got a friend still to this day. He's got some friends who are his family's very conservative. They never ask him about Are you dating anybody? Are you seeing anybody? What's going on? Nothing. My family that I interact with, who were very supportive and very engaged with Brian for 30 years, they got used to that. And so they ask me, are you dating somebody? How's it going? How's the grief? How do you miss Brian? But typically people don't ask that stuff because it's like you're not seen as a real couple almost. I know that sounds funky, but it is like it's like those social supports that we typically have are gone or not there for LGBTQ folks that get married.
There was a guy. So when I was engaged, about to get married, my ex-wife, my fiance at the time, we flew over to Ireland and we had our dogs being sheltered. And the couple that owned it, married gay men. The guy that I would thought would have been probably the feminine one was totally wrong, and I thought the big guy would have been more the masculine one. Totally wrong. And I remember like worried about my dogs, and I was like, "Hey," he pretty much told me, he said, "Will, shut the f up. If I need you, I'll let you know." And I'm like, "Who the hell's?" I'm like, "You know what? Fine, he has it." But when I came back from Ireland, I had this conversation with him in the dog kennel, and he was like, me being ignorant, I was just back from the Marine Corps not too long ago, and I say ignorant because I didn't know I could ask these questions, and I was asking questions of like, "Hey, how was it?" I was like, "What's the big deal about being married?" And he was like, "Well, you think it's a religious thing. What happens when my partner at the time, he said, if he gets sick, I can't see him. I don't have legal custody over it." And I'm like, oh, so it's way more than what I thought it was.
Yeah.
And the more that he allowed me to ask him questions, because I was coming at it from a place of curiosity, not as a place of you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. I'm like, hey, tell me more. And the more that he told me, I was like very taken back because these are the things that I'll say I'd never actually thought about. Being a straight white guy, it's something that we don't really think about. A lot of the rules here in America have been based off of white straight Christians, and it's interesting about how between education and conversations has been able to change. And
Right. Yeah. It's interesting when you were talking about that. I was thinking about Brian and our taxes, specifically our finances, because we had those barriers also, and gay and lesbian couples used to have to go through all these hoops. They'd have to like appoint power of attorneys, appoint healthcare power of attorneys. They'd have to do it multiple times in case their family fought it, and all these things. And but once we were civil union, that stuff went to the side. But Vermont recognized us. It became a nightmare. Vermont recognized us as a married couple, and the federal government didn't recognize us as a married couple. We had to do our taxes every year 4 fucking times because of this. 4 times, and we took turns managing our money, and it was Brian's turn, and he was just fed up with it. And he came up to me, I think it was in 2009 or 2010. He's like, I've had it. I fucking had it. I'm not doing our taxes 4 times. This is what we had to do. I had to do my tax on the federal level as an individual because we weren't recognized as an individual. Brian had to do his taxes on the federal level as an individual, but in Vermont, we're recognized as a married couple. So we had to do a 3rd federal form as a married couple because that's what Vermont based its taxes on. And then we had to do the Vermont taxes based on that. And so this was before Obama and the Supreme Court made the gay and lesbian relationships recognizable on the federal level. So like 5-6 years before that, he came up to me. He says, I'm not fucking doing it anymore. He says, I don't care if we go to jail. He said, I don't care if they come to the house. He said, it's not right. I don't care. It's bullshit. And so, one of the hallmarks of our relationship was that we we were in it together. And so I said, yes. I was like, all right, I'll sign the taxes to the federal government as a married couple. And so for years, and before it was even recognized, we were filing our taxes illegally because, I mean, that's just ridiculous to have to do it so many times. And so we did one as a married couple and then did the Vermont one and was done. Easy peasy. But it was a big burden before that. And then, of course, we were at risk of going to jail.
So the aspect that I love to touch about in the podcast is the mental health area is actually not being identified as a married couple as well you're married, not being identified as humans because it's like, well, we don't want to actually play ball. It's like here's all these extra barriers and parameters that could be looked up as are they being set against us or they just have not actually are they archaic, and if they're archaic, why are they actually not moving a little bit quicker? Why is there so much penalization? Are they just trying to get money out of us? Are they just trying to shut us down? And then this stuff does not actually just stop in one area. It bleeds over into other parts of the relationship where if you and Brian were married for a very long time, in realistic eyes, it's, well, it doesn't make it easier for you two. If you guys are now in the paper, well, you can look at the paper and say, wow, we were one of the first people to actually get married as a gay couple. This is fucking outstanding. But then it can also emotionally charge of these fucking cocksuckers. They don't want to actually identify me as a friggin' married couple. This is some bullshit.
Yeah.
Sorry for the language.
Even as recently, I'll tell you, even as recently, we celebrated our 25th anniversary. We went to Disney to celebrate our 25th anniversary. And it turned out to be a really great time. But there were some bumps along the way. They have these, lots of people go to Disney for their wedding and shit like that, or their honeymoon. And they had this package with 2 coffee cups in it. They were like Mickey Mouse coffee cups. There was a black one for Mickey Mouse, for him, and then there was a white one for Minnie Mouse for her. And it was in one big package. And I'm like, well, I want 2 hymns. I don't want a him and her. And so I got the package and brought it over to the checkout piece, and was like, I just want to take one of the black mugs from this one and put it in here because I want 2 black mugs. They were like, why? I'm like, because I'm here with my anniversary and with my spouse and we're doing this piece. That's not allowed. I'm like, I'm not buying 2. There were like it was in a small crowd of people that were spectating, but we were going back and forth on this. They ended up calling the manager, the assistant manager. There were like 3 people there because they were like, no, you can't do that. And I'm like, I am not. I am doing that. And they let me do that. That was, but that's a battle. They're fucking mugs, right? They're coffee cups, right? It was a battle. I'm pleased to say that we went to Disney a year later, and they no longer had anything packaged. They had all the mugs separately on the shelf, so you could get. I was like, I poked Brian. I'm like, we did that. We did that. Somebody probably went to some meeting and said, you wouldn't believe what happened. And then somebody was like, well, why are we putting them together anyway? Let's just put them out separately. That was a really nice, I remember that fondly. Afterwards, the second time when they were all out on there separately.
The other aspect that people don't look at with grief is all that love, all that the frustration that was actually incorporated into it. So if we go back to the time capsule of when you were actually doing the MDMA and you were going through it, like I'm pretty sure it sparked up all these type of loving and emotions, these pictures, these past tense. And then the aspect that I only really learned this year was that when we actually have a partner, we lose part of our memory when we lose them because they remember things differently than us, and they're the ones that actually keeps our checking balances. So, how did it feel the next day after you went through this the journey that you went on?
Um, the most powerful pieces. I'm glad you said that because the most powerful pieces from the entire time capsule was the letters that we wrote to each other, and the letter that I read Brian's letter that he wrote to himself, and we both wrote at a point that in the letter was like, "Are we still together? Am I still alive? Um, and are you still doing this? Are you still doing this? Are you still doing that? I hope not, because it was really irritating that you used to do this. But if you are, I still love you nonetheless. Um, but that was it. The bubble wrapping allowed me to integrate that and access that. And so the next day I was able to read those letters again with a clear head without the bubble wrap because I'd already done it in a sense. And so it was like moving from the you know bunny slope on a ski hill to the green trails, right? And felt like I had some mastery and wasn't going to fall apart, and so I could uh, embrace those more fully without having to be wrapped up in MDMA.
How did the tears feel? Like, I know how we can say they physically felt, but actually, when you were processing and you were crying, 'cause I know when I actually went through my own mental health journey and I did it for, we guided for about 13 weeks. I did a residential program.
Mm-hmm.
And how did it feel to actually have those, the tears of sorrow, the tears of joy, the tears of love, and the tears of pain?
It felt, I think the you I really liked what you said earlier where you were talking about this like alkaline and acid piece, that there's this piece in the middle of 7.1,
Correct.
right?
Water.
Right. And so often what happens is that that those tears come and they're there, and if you're really present and genuine and authentic, it's 7.1. But if you're like uh, regretting the past, and all this other stuff, beating yourself up about the past, chiding yourself about the past, all this other bullshit that's in our heads about the past, that it becomes more acidic,
Hmm.
right? And so those tears are there, but they get hijacked
Hmm.
by these regrets, and the or those tears are there, or you're worrying about the future or the law. What am I going to do now? Yeah, we had a great time, but now look at me. Look at what I got now. Fuck, I'm never going to find something. It's going to be on and on and on and on. And so it becomes more alkaline as we're doing that stuff because it gets hijacked in that direction. And so it allowed me, I think, to be more fully present and experience the depth and the loss without the other bullshit, without the I wish I coulda, shoulda, this thing should have happened, any of that other stuff that was potentially there, um, didn't happen. Which was that's you think about it, that's really what was preventing me from tapping into the time capsule in the first place. It wasn't the content of the time capsule. It was all the other bullshit in my head around the content in the time capsule that was hijacking me, and off I was going. And so I ended up not getting hijacked and was able to really be present with that. Yeah.
So, well, I'm actually going to hijack this and switch it up a little bit. As a person that,
Hijack away. Hijack away.
as a person that struggled to be tied down in academia, what actually allowed you to be able to be hijacked, or actually not hijacked, but actually be held down? Not held down is the wrong way. To be able to make a solid decision on Brian. What actually allowed you to fully love and commit when back in academia? It was, I know they're two different things, but you also like, maybe I like this, maybe I like that, maybe I like this. What actually allowed you to fall in love?
You know, most people think that enduring relationships are about falling in love, and it's not. They're not. Enduring relationships um, are about commitment. Um, at its core, it's about commitment. Because honestly, during our 30 years together, um, I fell out of love with Brian. He fell out of love with me. Honestly, that happened. And we had to make an effort to fall in love again with each other because we were committed. And that happened right after we were civil union, one of those bumps in there. Maybe, so maybe the 12 or 13-year mark was, we found ourselves really distant from each other. And there wasn't passion, and but we were committed. And so the options were fix it or live a life of awfulness, no passion. No, we had decided early on in our relationship that we were not going to give up. Period. And if that meant we talked a lot early in our relationship, like, if you got in a car accident and you were, unable to walk, so you had no feelings from the waist on down, and we couldn't have sex, what in how we defined it, what would that be? Would that end our relationship? Would we open the relationship up? Would I, and it's easy. It's easy for you folks for listening to this. It's easy to be like, well, of course, if if somebody lost their leg, then of course you'd be there for them. But you take another step on that and say, well, yeah, what if somebody, um, suddenly came down with PTSD? And would you still be for them in the same sense that you would be for them if they lost their leg? Well, suddenly people lose all their compassion when it comes to PTSD, anxiety, depression, alcoholism, addiction, right? It's like shape up or ship out, right? You would turn to a person who lost their fucking leg and say, start walking or get out. Because I wanted a person I signed up for a person who had 2 legs and now you only have 1. Right. And so I signed up for a person who was, had their shit together, and now you're an alcoholic, and I have to get rid of the alcohol in my house? Fuck that. Get out. That's what? That's crazy. But people do that all the time. It's like emotions are, something that we kind of tolerate, but not really. And so we early on talked about this commitment and being there, and this idea of having each other's back no matter what. And every single time, that taxes thing tested that commitment, right? Oh yes, let's go to jail together. All right, I'm in. Wherever we're going, whatever it's fucking doing, I'm in.
So one of the episodes I had way back, probably about a few months ago, it was talking about intimacy, and we were talking about men with intimacy. A lot of times, especially with straight men, I don't know how it is as far as you guys as well. I want to say you guys in the gay community. I don't know how it is as well. It's like physical intimacy is a huge deal. That's how we transfer a lot of our emotions or a lot of our feelings towards somebody. Like we'll do stuff around the house. And what it sounded like was actually reevaluating how do we show intimacy and actually being able to connect a little bit deeper than it is just for a guy can't have sex with you. You and your husband weren't able to have sex. Like, what does that really look like? What is that? Is that actually the end all be all? Is there going to be a way that we're able to show each other love differently? And when I look at like how mental health is actually being really hijacked, or not hijacked, that's the wrong word, is really being driven by our emotions. And if we don't know how to name our emotions, we don't know how to express our emotions, we don't know how to really be able to get within it, then the emotions are going to be the one driving the car and we're along for the ride. And if the only way that we know how to be able to get close to it is by physical, I feel like it's actually a huge part and kind of plays into what you were just saying.
Oh, absolutely will. And it's just as true in the gay. It's probably twice as true in the gay community because there's two men that are involved. There's two men that are involved in that piece. I know some, and there's a huge amount of pressure to have sex and perform that way. I mean, you look at the, apps like Grindr, where people are just putting themselves out there as like tops and bottoms and in between and this thing and that thing, and it's hugely sexually driven in the gay community, and so and to be honest, it became an issue because you get old. This is the truth for guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things are not going to be working like they were working, whether you're gay, straight, bi, it doesn't matter what you are. And things are going to change. And so you have two choices. You can either ignore it or do something about it. And we, like always, just like with the taxes, just like with getting civil union, there were some bumps around that with family members, just like those stupid fucking mugs at Disney World. We had each other's backs around those things and said, what is it? We don't want it. What does that mean? What is it? What do we have to do now that there's issues around sexual performance, or you're not as horny as you used to be? What do we do? And we figured that out. I was really, really lucky that because you can be a person that wants to figure it out, but if your other person doesn't give a shit and want to figure it out, then you're up a shit's creek,
Mm-hmm.
right? You both have to want to figure it out and be committed, and that far outweighs everything else. Even what you're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You get together and someone says, well, I love this person because, we're both into hiking, and what happens if that person can't hike anymore? Right? I can't hike anymore. I've had 2 knee replacements and a hip replacement. Hiking is not on my things to do much more. So I'm paddle boarding, right? You have to figure it out. You either figure it out or you stay stuck. Brian hated hiking. And he drank a lot. He smoked cigarettes, and he drank a liter, one of those big, ginormous bottles of Coca-Cola, like every day. Yeah. And so there was no way we were going to go on a hike for any of these things. And so what we ended up doing, we have to figure it out. You have to sit down and say, how do we make this work? And so what we ended up doing was doing these 7 to 10 day canoe expeditions. Up in Minnesota in the Boundary Waters was the first one that we did. Then we found one over in Maine on the Allagash Wilderness Waterway. And I mean, we could put a shit ton of Coca-Cola in the canoe. So we had Coca-Cola, cigarettes, a canoe, and we went. It wasn't hiking, but we were outdoors. We were camping in a tent. We were cooking over a fire. We figured it out. We didn't say, well, you have to be this way or you're out of here, right? I was a vegetarian when we first met. I'm not a vegetarian anymore. That switched sometime along the way, right? So the same thing can happen, right? Everything changes. Everything. You have to so if you base your relationship on something that's dynamic, we both love Star Trek. I don't know. We both love horror movies. Boom. What's going to happen when that changes? It's going to change.
So what all I hear is communication,
collaboration
and communication. it's where was the pivotal point where you guys were able to start learning how to communicate effectively and be empathetic?
There were multiple pivotal points. Because just when you think you got tested around the canoeing piece, then there's a piece about sex that you get tested on, right? And then you and so it really required us us to really stick in there, and be and not give up. And Brian, I will never forget. Oh, he was so pissed one time, because we agreed that we were in it. We were going to work it out, and I, Jesus Christ, I was the one that was like, "We're never going to hold the relationship hostage. You better promise me that you're never going to hold. We're never going to hold the relation. We're never going to say maybe we shouldn't be together. Blah 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 blah." And so we remember really talked about that. I'm like, yes, we are committed. We're going to do this. And guess who the first one it was that said, maybe we shouldn't be together. It was fucking me. It was so pissed. He said, I remember him pointing at me. He was like, you said we wouldn't fucking do that, and you just did exactly what you said we weren't going to do. And we had to hang in there and work that thing out. And so it's you want to think that there's this one pivotal point that's going to happen and off you go. But really it's about constant corrections, because everything's always changing.
Well, speaking about everything always changing, when you started to learn how to grieve Brian and then also grieve G. Scott plus Brian, how was that influential as far as your pursuits and then also your other relationships with your families and your friends? How was that when you started to be able to grieve your old identities, because it's you, him, and both you guys together?
Yeah, it was, one of the pieces that came upon early, and I feel really shitty about this, and I've confessed this. I should be done confessing this, but it's really an awful thing that I was trained as a psychotherapist that this is how grief is, right? It was like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, stages of grief, anger, bargaining, depression, denial, blah 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 blah, acceptance. Everybody goes through this, and that's not how it is at all. It's not fucking how it is at all. And so I think about all the people that I put through. I mean, we even did this. This is how fucked up it was. We even took this. I remember doing this. I used to work for the Department of Corrections, and we had people that had, addiction issues with the Department of Corrections. And we said to them, you need to go through the stages of grief, because alcohol was your best friend, because heroin was your best friend. You have to grieve that identity. So you have to go through anger and denial and stuff. I can't believe we did that. I mean, it was so wrong. Couldn't be more wrong. And I didn't discover it until it happened to me, and I was on the other side. And I was like, wait a minute, what's wrong with this? I have a friend who had to, basically she had to kill her son a couple months ago, because he was on life support. And she's, his mother. And he's like 30 years younger than her. And talk about awfulness. Oh, awfulness. And since then, she said the same thing. She was like, oh my God, you're right. She had other losses in the past, but nothing that as big as this. And she's like, there is nothing. I said, you just have to be, when the grief comes up, keep it. I didn't use this, but I'm going to steal this now. It's my will analogy. You have to keep it neutral and not make that grief alkaline and not make it acidic. right in the middle, 7.1, as it is, not as you would like it to be. And yeah, that was a big learning process. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but I certainly answered a question.
So you answered quite a bit of it. And so the question I'll kind of circle it back to, because you mentioned addictions, which wasn't the thing with you, but it also what you learned in the DOC, the Department of Corrections. It's when you lose a person, you lose your addictions, you're losing part of your identity. It's a much more raw. Like I know when I was engaged or I was in a relationship, I knew I had to have a certain persona about me. I had somebody that throttled what I can do and what I can't do because I was actually keeping them in check and they were keeping me in check. And same thing with alcohol and substances. It actually allowed it to either be throttled or changed to allow people to get so close to me. So after when you started to grieve yourself and grieve those identities, how was it actually developing these other relationships with people? Because they know you for you and Brian, but how was it when you were allowing yourself to be just G. Scott?
That's was a hard piece. That's been a hard piece. And I even have one friend, and we're not friends anymore. Um, this often this often happens in grief. I remember when I was going through this, somebody came up to me and said, "Have you lost any friends yet?" And because they get locked into this way of being, and this as I was out there, I met another guy, Peter, and fell in love, and it totally destroyed everything in my. I was like totally messed up, and had to do a lot of work to get through that. But this one friend of mine was like really anti Peter because it felt, I guess, to him that I was somehow not being Brian, not recognizing Brian anymore, or cheating on him, or I don't know what it was. But he was very resistant around accepting that, and then would gaslight me around these things. And so it's been a challenge. I will say this, that we had vacations that we used to go on in specific locations. Like we'd go to New Orleans, or we'd go canoeing on the Allagash, or we'd go to Florida to visit my mom. And I've not gone back to those places because they're just too charged with, because we went there. It wasn't like we went there once. We went there like 10 times. And so now one of the things I've done is I have a camper. I go RVing with the dogs. I taught the dog. That's one of the reasons that the dogs know how to paddleboard. I taught my dogs how to paddleboard, and the only reason I taught my dogs how to paddleboard was because I couldn't go to these places that I used to go with Brian, and I had to do something else, and I wanted to do something with the dogs. I tried mountain biking, which was a nightmare. Can you imagine mountain biking with dogs? Like, that's just crazy. On a road, whatever. And so, but now they love going on the paddleboard, and they're trained and whole 9 yards. So we can get, if they fall in the middle of in the water, in the middle of the lake, they know how to get back on. I can get them back on, all that stuff. But I'm there. I'm still there as a person who was, that part of Brian is still with me. Even on the intimacy side, I said this on another podcast that I couldn't believe I said it. So I'm going to say it here because I've already, I've already done the bunny slope. I can move on to the green thing, or the green scale. Brian died in December of 2019. So that's actually 6 years ago this week. And I still cannot come without thinking of Brian. I can watch porn. So it's not about people either. I can watch porn. I do this. There was less of that with Peter, where I was like, that was one of the things that was like amazing and also frightening and scary, was that, I was having an orgasm and being totally present with Peter. I didn't have to imagine Brian in order to have an orgasm. But yeah, even, today, if I'm like jerking off, I end up quickly thinking of Brian at the very end. Boop, boop. Yeah.
So what people don't realize, and I don't say people don't always, a lot of times people think it's just a physical thing. When you have a more of an emotional or mental, like emotional relationship with a person, you get tethered to them, even in your sexual being.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's, if you're like, there's men that are like this, and I know a few that have a hard time actually getting off, whether with a partner. And but they'll get off with somebody that they actually truly love. And it's a very different type of relationship.
Huge.
And what I was actually going to ask you and possibly have you something to percolate on. I do this around one of my friends' dads. I call it my living day. And a lot of times it used to be a plateau that dropped down because it was a very hard day. Try doing something outside your comfort zone on that area. Do something that you normally wouldn't do. Like I started to go to plays. I went to the symphony. I actually fell in love with the symphony, believe it or not. Um, I started to go to things like painting and other areas that I was very uncomfortable or unfamiliar with because it was very foreign to me. I would highly challenge you to think about around his anniversary is to live a little bit for him. And living is not just surviving or going through the motions, but actually being more in the present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And being more in the presence is this piece of being like water, 7.1.
Being yes. And it's interesting because holidays, anniversaries, they hijack our emotions, they hijack our time. Places, smells, sound. Like I'm pretty sure people that are listening to this, when you smell like a burning body and you actually remember that, oh, I remember where I was. Or you're you're seeing, like for me sometimes, and I've actually said referenced this many times, seeing a pothole sometimes will trigger me back to a place that had IEDs in it. But then I have to say, thank you, Will, for protecting me, and give myself a pat on the back to be able to say, yes, you brought me back there. What you were doing is actually helping me to survive. Or hearing certain songs remind me of past exes. And I'm like, this hurts, but I am super grateful for the opportunity to have spent that time with that individual. Even though that we're no longer together, I'm able to been able I've been privileged to know that individual that deeply.
Yes. Yeah. We did that when you said songs. When all of our vacation places, we had like 5 of them that we went to, like Disney and New Orleans and other places, all had soundtracks that we had put together that we was specifically that we listened to when we were on those vacations because it was like that'll be this was the thinking at the time. That'll be fun because at some time in the future, then I'll hear that song and I'll be instantly back to that vacation spot because we don't listen to those tunes outside of that specific vacation. And and now those tunes are there. When they come up, I'm like right back to some place that we used to go to in New Orleans, or some place that we used to go to at the beach, or some place that we used to go to in San Francisco, playing backgammon on the roof and watching the clouds roll, the fog roll in at the Golden Gate. Um, yeah.
It's a very interesting it's an interesting thing. Like a friend of mine, Chelsea, just chimed in. She said her ex-husband used to smell lavender. He used to have a lot of lavender candles. So when she smells it, it's like a boa constrictor around her heart because it hurts. And it's like these physical responses or these emotional responses. And one of the things I remember learning from the psychedelic retreat that I did back in May, I was doing a psilocybin, and the person that was facilitating it, he was a corpsman. He spent, I think, 6 years with the Marines, and then he spent it with the Navy, and he spent it with the SEAL teams. Really nice guy. And when he talked about the tears under a microscope, the tears actually from sadness to happiness, they have a different shape. And one of the other areas that really hit home is like when we start crying, we want to wipe them away. So that we were taught at a young age to hide them. But when we're able to allow them to feel them, allow them to taste them, it it changes it. So like these memories, these songs, these soundtracks, to could charge us back to a place where, oh, I remember driving in the car with a hot sunny day and he farted next to me. Oh, that piece of shit. He locked the windows too. So it's like those things that we remember, that it was love and disgust at the time, but it was just these happy, beautiful moments that we were able to have a chance to endure. But
And they're blessings now when they
yeah,
come up. You know, as long as you don't resist them and go all alkaline or all acidic, that boa constrictor around your heart is a blessing, right?
yeah,
Unless it's only not a blessing when you're like, I don't want it. I'm like, because here's the truth, is that there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of people who die every day, and we don't give two shits about them. We don't even know them, right? They're dying all over the place. We don't give two shits about them. To have this feeling like this person said to you about this boa constrictor on your heart, that's a testament that they really live their life fully, right? Because if you don't live your life fully, you never end up with a boa constrictor around your heart. If you live your life safely, you never grieve, ever. And so you get through and you just, this. But if you embrace the depths of love, it's the flip side of the coin. And so I always remember, the greater the pain is just a testimonial to the depth of love.
it's beautifully said. I agree with that wholeheartedly. It's a way to be able to, I don't want to say measure, but we're able to understand the losses also because there was a lot of love there.
Right.
So,
Right.
Mr.
And
Chief,
here's the follow-up question.
yeah,
And this is, if you knew that if someone came up to me 30, 40 years ago and said, you're going to meet this guy and you're going to have all of these feelings, but then after that, you're going to have all these other feelings because he's going to be gone, would you still do it?
in a
Otherwise,
heartbeat.
if you don't, you're going to miss out on all these feelings. You're not going to have the grief, but you're going to miss out on all these. The grief I feel is absolutely worth it, without a doubt. I would definitely do it over again. And I bet my friend who had to unplug her son, if somebody said to her, if you could have that relationship, avoid that relationship and avoid the pain, or have that relationship and have the pain, I totally know she would say, I'd have that relationship. The pain is worth the price of admission.
The love, the pain. I don't think there's, you know, I think the difficult part about with the pain is untangling it, untangling all that love, all the sorrow, all the loss, by being able to be realized it was just a privilege to be able to experience it twice.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's I usually like to keep these for about an hour, and I know we got into some good stuff. I really appreciate of what you had to share. I have a question. What is the message that you would like the listeners to hear from you?
Boy, yeah, I've said this to many people over and over again, and that is, if you're grieving, if you know somebody who is grieving and you see them grieving, don't go up to them and say, I'm so sorry. Go up to them and say, congratulations. And they're going to look at you strange when you say that. And nobody else will have said that to them. And when they say to you why, and say to them what I said to you just earlier, that you had the privilege of loving so deeply that you feel this. That's really a blessing. So congratulations for living your life that way. It's something to be. Grief is not a problem to be erased. It's not an issue to be solved. It's not something to pass through. It's something to celebrate. Yeah.
Did you write a book on grief?
5 of them.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'll make sure that I get some of the book titles from you before when Mr. G. Scott, Gnostic Scott. It was an honor to have a conversation with you, and I hope to have another one with you sometime soon.
Thank you. I look forward to that too, Will. Thanks.